Castlevania Dracula X on the Super Nintendo. Gorgeous sprites, that amazing pumping music right in the beginning, classic Castlevania gameplay. This is the game that brought Richter Belmont to America in 1995. Except it isn't. This isn't the same game Japan got 2 years earlier. It's not even a port. It's actually just a completely different game made by a B team at Konami, and honestly, it shows. See, in 1993, Japan got Castlevania Rondo of Blood on the PC Engine CD, known in the US TurboGrafx 16. It had branching paths, multiple playable characters, CD quality music, they even had a lead guitarist who's credited at the end of the game, and all the works. The US, well, we got this. A linear, brutally difficult remake that looks good, but cut more than half the content. And the craziest part, they literally copy and pasted boss movesets, removed entire characters, and somehow made it more difficult than Rondo of Blood. Today I'm going to break down exactly what happened, why it happened, and whether Konami's B team actually made something better by accident, or just something to be written off and mocked for. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about what Rondo of Blood actually was, because if you grew up in the US, like I did, there's a very good chance you had no idea that this game even existed until the PSP remake came out in 2007. Rondo of Blood was Konami's flagship title for the PC Engine in Japan. It was never intended to be released outside of the country, which gave the artists some leeway in how they portrayed certain characters. It was certainly an ambitious title, multiple branching paths, it had alternate endings, 2 playable characters including Maria Renard, who played completely different from Richter. The game had its own rescue system where you'd find prisoners throughout the levels. Saving them unlocked different routes, and even Maria as a playable character. The CD format meant that full voice acting was a go. A Red Book audio soundtrack that still slaps today, I mean it's incredible, and way more content than a cartridge could ever hope to hold. So why didn't the US get this version? 2 reasons. One, the TurboGrafx 16, which is what we called the PC Engine, completely bombed in the US. The NEC company that made it, they're still around today, had maybe 5% market share in the US. Nobody had this system. Although I did try convincing my father to let me buy one at Service Merchandise. That didn't go over well. And then the second reason, and this is the kicker here, is that NEC apparently had some kind of exclusivity deal with Konami that prevented them from porting Rondo to any other region. Previously I said it was never intended to release in the US in the first place, but this also saw no release outside of Japan at all, not even Europe. So Konami had a problem there. Rondo was stuck on a dead console, but they did want to have Richter Belmont brought to the US. So, in comes the B team 2 years later, while the A team, IGA at this point, would be working on Symphony of the Night. Now, when I say B team, I'm not trying to insult the developers here. What I'm getting at is that it wasn't made by the Rondo of Blood development team. It was a completely different team in Konami, and from what little I could find out about them, really had no experience with Castlevania games in general. So what they did instead were take the assets of Rondo of Blood and applied them to an entirely new game that they could fit onto a cartridge for the Super Nintendo. And that's where it gets interesting. Taking parts that are familiar if you've played both, music was very similar. In fact, they did port a lot of the music, and thanks to the Super Nintendo's incredible sound system, they were actually able to make those real instrument sounds sound incredibly authentic for a cartridge game. I would put the music work on what they were able to achieve with this right there with Donkey Kong Country. However, they couldn't go with the branching paths. It just wasn't possible with a cartridge, so it went back to the traditional linear style. They also removed Maria as a playable character, though she did remain in the game. The point of this game was that Dracula kidnapped your girlfriend and your sister was now Maria. The rescue system was by and large gone. You do save the 2 of them, or rather I say you can save the 2 of them, but rather it's not a mandatory thing. Instead it changes up how some of the game actually plays out, which was a nice little detail that they were able to add in to at least somewhat salvage the rescue system. This team also had an incredibly rushed timeline to get the game done. So they took the assets of what they had, they took what they believed could make a story out of what was in Rondo of Blood and condensed it down into a much more traditional Castlevania gameplay experience. But it did bring Richter Belmont and Item Crash, which was Richter's ability to use a super version of his sub-weapons. The proof is in the pudding that this was a rush job, and there's some very obvious examples. The big one to me is the Camilla boss fight. Camilla in Dracula X is fought at the clock tower, where you would fight death in this game if you did not save your girlfriend and Maria. Instead of fighting death, you'll fight Camilla. Though you'll get to the top of the clock tower, your girlfriend's actually sitting in the chair, but Camilla comes down, takes over her. The classic mask from Castlevania II, Simon's Quest, comes up, and then it shatters, and it's just a gigantic skull with two moving eyeballs, and Camilla sitting on top of the skull. This fight quite literally takes the entire shaft fight from Rondo of Blood, and instead of his orbs, it's Camilla's skull eyes. The skull eyes come out and they have the exact same attack pattern and animations as the orbs that Shaft was using in Rondo of Blood. So the multicolored one where it flies at you, you just have to dodge it. The two of them turn into giant fireballs that you have to dodge. And then the two that turn into lightning that shoots lightning columns down to the ground that you probably are never going to be fast enough to not get it hit at least once by them. The entire fight, they basically cut and paste all of the animations for the eyes, for the orbs. And they just took all of his flying movements and just added them to Camilla's skull. Really cheap way to make a boss fight, but I'll at least give it to them that they thought ahead and said, okay, you're only going to get this copy and pasted boss fight if you fail to save the only two people you need to save in this game, which were brought up in the opening scroll. So sucks to suck, you get a shitty boss fight. Let's talk about what didn't make it from Rondo of Blood into Dracula X, because it's a very, very long list. First and foremost is Maria Renard. In Rondo, you rescue her early in the game, and she becomes a fully playable character with her own moveset, her own abilities, and even her own ending. Her gameplay is radically different from Richter's, and it's much more lighthearted as she controls animal powers. You could really blitz through Rondo of Blood incredibly easily if you just play as Maria. In Dracula X, she's in one cutscene, that's it. She's also your sister as opposed to this girl with magic powers and control over animals and nature. Then there's the branching paths. Rondo had this whole system where your choices mattered. Save certain prisoners, unlock alternate routes, take different paths, fight different bosses. Multiple endings were based on who you rescued, making the game have a lot of replayability. In fact, once you beat it the first time, you get a percentage of how much you actually cleared of the game. And to the surprise of many the first time they played this, you were probably somewhere around 24 to 30% complete after your first playthrough. Dracula X, on the other hand, completely linear. Stage 1, 2, 3, etc. right up to Dracula. No choices, no alternate routes, no real replay value beyond try not to die as many times this time, which good luck on the Dracula fight. I should really see if someone's done a no-kill run on this game. Or no death run, rather. And then there was the save system. Rondo let you save your progress because it was on a CD, and the NEC PC engine already had built-in memory for saving. So this was an easy thing for them to add on. Even though Super Nintendo games had battery backup, they chose to go back to the password system as far as your progress. So it was a 3x3 square with 4 different icons you can put into each one of those squares. Based on the pattern that you put in would determine which level you're going to go to and what sub-weapon you would start with. It works, but you were never going to get a save system that allowed you to do or allowed you to load exactly what you had when you left. You also didn't get those patterns until the end of beating the level. If you had Nintendo Power at the time, you were able to get, hidden passwords that would let you start with certain sub-weapons if you wanted to start a level over or start at a certain level. But then this is where it starts to get a little bit weird to me, and I'm going to assume, and I'm sure I could probably research this a bit better for a real answer, the TurboGrafx 16 system came out in 1987, well before the Super Nintendo did, well before the Genesis did. It was technically the first 16-bit system to hit the market. Then they had their CD add-on, which Sega would try to replicate later and fail to capture any audience, whereas the PC engine at least captured Japan. Did quite well over there, actually. The CD add-on for the PC Engine also meant an increase in graphical fidelity, more colors it could display. It was able to have much better music, CD quality music, by having developers switch from MIDI-based music to actually putting instrumental pieces onto it. So it boosted the fidelity of the system in audio and in graphics, but as an older technology, it was still held back by the base system that it was attached to. So when Dracula X came out, not only was it higher resolution, but they were able to use the Super Nintendo's additional graphical prowess to create some cool effects. I would actually argue the first level of each game is done better in Dracula X. In Rondo of Blood, the first level, it's obvious that the town is burning. That first level is also a great Easter egg. That is the town from Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. On the second screen that you load into, there's a skeletal ape on the top that throws a barrel down, and there's a jump where you can see water and there's a sign. It looks like it's just painted on, but if you go over to it and you press up, it reads the name of the town, and it's the name of the town from Simon's Quest, all with this amazing guitar-led music playing in the background. It's just such a cool little Easter egg. Unfortunately, that was entirely removed from Dracula X. They don't make any mention of that at all, but they added this really cool flame effect in the background to show that the town really was burning, whereas on the PC Engine version, it's kind of an in and out going orange tinted back to kind of give the illusion that the entire town's burning, so the sky is turned orange. It still looks great, but I like the artistic choice that they were able to make for the first level in Dracula X. It's pretty much the best level in the entire game too. It's like they focused all of their development into that stage. And that is the paradox of Dracula X. It's a worse game, has way less content. The final fight is completely changed with the exception of the moveset and made incredibly difficult for no particular reason. The only thing I can think of was to make the game last longer by frustrating the hell out of people so that they put it down and then months later come back and play through the whole thing again, get back to Dracula again, and then realize why they quit the first time. I can't think of any other good reason. And to explain it, at this point everyone's played the final battle of Rondo of Blood, even if you've never played Rondo of Blood. It's the opening of Castlevania Symphony of the Night when you're playing as Richter. Now, given the fact that Richter has the slide kick, the uppercut, it's a much stronger version of Richter at the beginning of Symphony of the Night, and you also can't lose that fight either because Maria will come out and save you, and most people were probably left scratching their head as to who the hell that is and why she just put a bunch of spectral animals into you. We get our answer later, at least, down the line. 10 years later, actually, when the game is officially released here. In Rondo of Blood, it's that exact fight. Slight difference in change of graphics, and instead of having their conversation about the evil of man and humans at the end of the fight, they have it in the beginning of the fight with the now infamous voice acting that they decided to change in 2007 on the PSP version. I still don't get it. The final fight of Rondo of Blood it's Dracula. He has two phases, just like in Symphony of the Night. It's the same fight. He still shoots the same 3 fireballs. You still have to dodge the 2 dark energy balls, and then the second phase, he turns into the large beast. And once you kill him, that's it. It's done. Dracula X decides, well, that was too easy, so we're going to play the floor as lava. Instead of having an entire floor to work with, they make it like Dracula didn't finish building his own throne room and you're fighting on top of columns, and you can very easily just jump and fall right between them before Dracula even comes out to fight you, because the jumping in this game is very much like the jumping of the previous games, with the exception of 4. 4, as a whole separate aside, if you ask me, was not one of the better Castlevania games. Because of the multi-directional whipping, they made the jumping super forgiving. They made it a much easier experience to make it much more accessible at the time, and I wasn't really a big fan. In fact, it was a huge step back for people in the US when they picked up Dracula X 4 years later in '95 to have all of that removed, on top of the many reasons why the game was not so fondly received in the US. That was one of the reasons, was that it was significantly more difficult than Super Castlevania IV, which was being played by a whole new generation of kids that had played the Nintendo versions who were used to those levels of difficulty. But Richter in Dracula X and in Rondo of Blood move significantly faster than Simon. But the jumping was back to the Nintendo version, where the jumping was very precise. Once you're in midair, that's kind of it. If you missed your jump, there's no trying to like waft over. Like that's it. And you just kind of whoop, and you fall into a pit. Trying to dodge Dracula's fireballs or attacking them, you're going to fall into the pit. Once he gets to his second phase, they changed the look of his second phase as well. And again, it was done to make it more difficult. In Rondo of Blood, he's this big hulking beast, and his big thing is that he jumps up and down, and that's how you dodge him. He really only has 3 moves in that phase, and it's to jump, it's to shoot 3 fireballs consecutively, and it's to shoot the energy wave at you. Now, he has all 3 of those abilities in Dracula X, but he flies. So not only do you have to jump between those pillars, but he just has free roam. He's just flying everywhere between them. You can't duck underneath him like you did in Rondo of Blood. They made him taller and skinnier, reducing the amount of area you can hit and increasing the amount of areas that he can hit you. By making him taller and skinnier made it much more complex. There was less room for you to move horizontally, which is really the only movement you get in the game. And it also made it so that you can't duck beneath him, and that your hitbox on him was so much smaller that timing your attacks while jumping, dodging, and hoping not to fall into the pit of despair became an entire feat of its own. And that is Dracula X and Rondo of Blood. Dracula X being born out of the remains of what was to create what was given to us in the West. Our first introduction to Richter, who is by far the most popular now of all of the Belmonts. But at what cost? We basically lost the entire game of Rondo of Blood, and we got this short amalgamation of just difficult game. But I still have incredibly fond memories of it, with the exception of the Dracula fight. But the music in the game, just like Rondo of Blood, is amazing. The sprite work on the Super Nintendo is done incredibly well. I will give my hat off to them. Now, they did have an additional 2 years to work on it, but with a smaller team, a less focused team, and ones that hadn't worked on Rondo of Blood and were just scouring the company's hard drive for assets to get a game out that they were told they had to make. So for that, I give that team hats off. And now all these years later that everyone now gets to experience Rondo of Blood, I would say go back and take a look and give another go at Dracula X. I think you will find it is not as bad as you may have remembered it if you're my age, and it may not be as bad as you previously heard. It's still fun, it's still a Castlevania game, and in my opinion, it is still way better than Super Castlevania IV, and everything will always be better than Castlevania II. Except maybe 4. I really don't like Super Castlevania IV.